All right, let's take a look at what we were doing yesterday. Okay, so we learned yesterday at Tshuva about what is my obligation if someone owes me money. Do I have an obligation to go out of my way to avoid that person so as not to make them feel uncomfortable? And the answer is that the Torah obligates me to only to not go out of my way to make the guy feel uncomfortable. But if I have a regular routine where we regularly interact, I'm not obligated to change that regular daily routine. So if I regularly walk past his house every day, I'm not obligated to change my route in order to avoid him. Obviously, there may be some midas chasidus involved. There may be some act of piety involved that may compel me to say, look, and I know the guy feels terrible and I don't want to make him feel bad. So maybe temporarily I'll walk, I won't, I won't go here or there to make him feel uncomfortable. So anyway, I said we were going to look at the footnote here before we go on. He says, Re'eh b'pischei Choshen, which is Rav Bloy's Sefer on Hilchos Choshen Mishpat. He's got a series. It's very voluminous. The Pischei Choshen is probably about a dozen volumes, if not more. Shekosav d'yesh lehistapek im hamal v'tzorech la'akem et haderech kedei shelo lifgosh et haloveh. He also discusses this issue, and he ends up with a suffix as to whether a malva, a creditor, has an obligation to sort of to take a detour to avoid coming in contact with the lova, with the debtor. Lefi divrei Rabbeinu mavur de lo tzarechim zeh davar ragil, and according to Rav Sharaga, you're not obligated to, as long as it's your regular routine. You don't have to change your regular routine. But others are not as clear. Shuv matzanu b'sefer Chasidim shekasav v'zelashanu. We also find in the Sefer Chasidim, which is written in the 14th century by Rabbi Yehuda HaChasid, it's a ancient Ashkenazic practices that are acts of piety that are not necessarily halachic. Im yalve adam la'animos, but he writes as follows: that if you lend someone money, v'hamalva yodeya shahalova emo lifroa, and the malva knows that the lova doesn't have the ability to pay it back, the ha'ani ish tov, and the person, the debtor, is a good man. Shim hayalo hayapareya biratzam va'ata emo. We know it's not like he's just trying to weasel out his way out of it. He's a good man, and if he had the money, he would pay it back. So im enu holech yelech lo hamalva mitzad acher. So any time, if the malva spots the lova walking by, the malva should try to step away and to avoid any kind of contact with the lova. Shelo yisbor halova ata rotza lishol lo etachov, so that the lova should not think, oh, the malva's coming, he's going to ask me for payment. And then he'll be further embarrassed. And this is true even if the malva ends up not asking him. But just appearing before him is itself, enough to embarrass the guy. So Yomer Halova Belibo, Ataya Chol Hamalva Lechoshdeni, Shalo Ertze Leporo Ve'inli Bameli Froa Akan Lashano, because the lova is going to fear that the malva is going to think ill of him, that the malva is going to think that the guy's just trying to be a weasel. Pirish Bazet Pasuk B'Tehillim, and the Sefer Chasidim interprets the pasuk in Tehillim, Ashrei Maskil El Dal. Fortunate is the man who is able to discern the lowly person. Dahainu shahamalva maskil ba'atzmo es hamachshava shel hadal. That the malva is a fortunate or blessed person if he's able to anticipate the thought process of the debtor, of the lowly person. And through that, he will avoid causing him further anguish. And it sounds like from the Sefer Chasidim that he's obligating the malva to sort of take a detour. Amnam yesh lomar da Sefer Chasidim Mayri shira salova shelo b'derech harigila v'lachen alav la'asos kain. But it could be that the Sefer Chasidim is only saying that they happen to be walking towards each other, not as a regular routine, But let's say, they see each other at a wedding, you know, and two different places, and the malva all of a sudden starts coming over to the salad bar or whatever, and he sees the lovas there. So the malva should say, you know what? I'll get my salad later. I'll get something else. I'll get the French fries in the meantime. But it could be that even the Sefer Hasidim would agree that if it's standard practice for them to regularly interact, the Malva does not have to desist from his regular routine. Shuvra Isi, the Sefer Mishpatei HaTorah. I saw another Sefer. I'm not familiar with the Sefer Mishpatei HaTorah. Shehistapek b'chiyai gavna shehal malva tzarach labor be'eze derech b'shvil tzrachav ha'ishiyim ve'eno mitkaven klal litzaer et halova v'al yodea b'beir shehalova yitzdarim yiraoto. He too is in doubt whether the malva has to change his daily patterns of behavior in order to avoid causing any anguish to the lova. And he leaves the matter off with, we need to think about this. But he seems to be siding that it's okay. Amnam lefima shehevi rabbeinu shlita mehamaram shif shafilu hecha shahamal v'lo mitkalavein klal letzaro kol zman shalova mitzar yesh iser. But based on the maram shif that we quoted yesterday, that even if your intention as a malva is not to cause him anguish, but you know that he will feel anguish, then you have to do whatever you can to avoid him. And that's why it says, do not be for him as an oppressor. And you should be machmir, especially because there could potentially be a Torah prohibition. And the only time that we can be lenient is if it's a daily routine, like going to Minyan or walking past his house daily, that you're not obligated to change. But again, you see a guy at a wedding, or you're at the local bank, and all of a sudden you see the lova walk in. You should, say to yourself, I'll go to the bakery. In the meantime, I'll wait for him to finish his business, and then I'll go in. So he says. So the bottom line is, try your best, but you're not obligated to change, to change your regular behaviors, since it's not your intention to embarrass him. Okay. Well, it has to be, we're not advocating that you let him know that you're avoiding him. There are ways to avoid someone without them knowing that you're avoiding them. That's fine. Sitting somewhere else in shul might not be right. That would be that would be conspicuous, right? Okay. Now, next shaila. Remember, we in the past we've talked about this issue. Normally, a shtar has to have two witnesses on it in order for it to be a legal document. But we also learned that since the convention in the Western world is for a person's signature to be sufficient, then you don't need to have two witnesses in order to collect on an IOU, on a promissory note. But he's going to discuss this issue. Shtar biksav yado shel halov v'shechayav v'hu toein v'rativ. So a malva, a creditor, presents an IOU, and it has the handwriting of the lova, and the lova claims, I paid this already. Okay, so here's the shaila. And this is a shaila that is being asked by the heirs of a person who has already deceased. And they say as follows: Avinu hilva kesef lekama anoshim v'niftar. Our father used to lend out money to various different people, but now he's passed away. V'yesh lanu shtar shekasav v'chasam b'ksav yado shel echad haloivim shehu chayev lanu es hakesef. And we have a promissory note from a guy who signed off to say that he owes our father money. Uhu toein shehu kvar pores achov shekosov bishtar la'aba. And when we presented this note to him, he said he already paid it back. Ha'im hu neman. We have to believe him. Or can we take him, or should we take him to Beis Din, based on the fact that the promissory note is still in our father's possession? So what would you say? What are the issues involved here? He destroys the note. Yeah. Mm, right. Right. Good. I mean, the Gemara does say that when you have a valid promissory note, the lova cannot say parativ because no one is going to pay back a loan without asking for the note back. So under normal circumstances, that's not a legitimate claim to say I paid you back if the creditor still has the promissory note. So the Gemara does discuss the possibility of making a receipt, but why is a receipt not a desirable thing to do for the debtor? Because it's out there, and also the Gemara says the debtor may not want to be responsible for holding on to a receipt. I'd rather not have to worry about, oh, where did I leave that receipt? If you look in my drawer, you'd spend a lot of time looking for that receipt because I'm not a good record keeper. Yeah, right, exactly. So if I borrowed money from someone and I paid them back, I would say, look, I have the money, it's right here in this envelope, but I need the promissory note before I give you the thing. And I'm not going to take a receipt from you because I don't want that note to be out there, like Mark says. And I don't want to be responsible for holding on to this receipt until Mashiach comes. Okay. So let's take a look at the tshuva and see what he says. Adam shekibel halva'a mechavero v'lo kasav lo shtar im chasimas edim ela kasav lo biksav yado k'moshe ragilam lichtov. So a person who accepts a loan, and he doesn't write up a normal promissory note that is discussed by the Gemara with two witnesses signing on it, but rather he just writes up an IOU, right? As the norm is, ani hachatum mata me'asher bazeh ki kibalti halva miploni besach kach v'kach ve'alai lahachzir lo. I, the undersigned, hereby certify that I have received the loan from Ploni of such an amount, and it is incumbent upon me to return this loan. And usually you put in a date by such and such a date, and then you sign it. That's an IOU. V'chasam lamata. O shekasav b'mechashay v'chatam lamata, or he printed it out from a computer and then just signs it on the bottom. Dino kemoshtar sheyachol legabot al yado minichse halova bilvad v'lo yachol legavot minachasim mishubadim. So the only difference between that kind of IOU and an IOU which has witnesses' signatures is that a promissory note with witnesses' signatures can collect even from encumbered property, which means if the creditor has no more assets to his name, the debtor has no more assets to his name, but he's recently sold off property, then if the creditor's debt predates that sale, he can go to the purchaser and put a lien on that property. But if you don't have witnesses' signatures, you certainly can collect from all of the unencumbered property of the debtor, 100%. The Yetera Mizu Katava Beit Yosef. And the Beis Yosef goes even further, B'Shem Shuta Ramban, She'im Hashtar Hu Biksav Yado, that if the shtar is in his own handwriting, Afal pi shelo chasam al ashtar, even if he never signed the shtar, but he says, I, Daniel Korobkin, and everyone can hereby owe so and so $100, and it's clear that it's my handwriting, even if I don't sign my name. Hu kosher kamosha Mishnah omeres begitin. It is kosher, and this is something that is noted by the Mishnah. Shim kasav get biksav yado ve'enolav edim kasher. That if a man writes a get to his wife and it's clear that it's his unique handwriting, then even if witnesses don't sign it, it's a valid get. Umefurish b'Yerushalmi shegova mibnei chorin. But the Yerushalmi says that it can only collect from unencumbered property, not from encumbered property. V'chein pasak marin b'shulchan aruch hotzi alav ksav yado shul chayiv lo gova min chasim b'nei chorin avlo min chasim mishubadim. This is codified in Shulchan Aruch as well. And on that, the Rama writes, Sham, bless you. Afilu im kasav lo biksav yado chasimas yadi shalamata ta'id alai k'meya edim afilu hachi lo gova min achasim mishubadim. The Rama just adds that even if a person says, may my signature act as the same power as 100 witnesses, that still doesn't strengthen the shtar any more than a regular IOU. You can only collect from unencumbered, but not from encumbered property. However, with all of that said, the shtar only has the power of collection if the lova acknowledges that he borrowed the money and he has not yet paid back. Aval im halova to'en shepara kvar es hachov, das harifa harashi shehu neman lomar paraiti. That there are Rishonim who say that since there are no witnesses on this document, if the debtor says, I paid you back, it's true I borrowed this. Yes, this is my handwriting, this is my signature, but I paid you back, then he's believed if he says, I paid you back, the Yishba Heses, he has to take an oath, the Yiftar, and then he can say, he's potter. The lo yachol hamal v'liton, in be'emes shilamta madua lo lokachta sashtar b'chazara. And here's the thing. Why is this different from the regular argument that a creditor can make, which is, if you paid me back, why didn't you take back the note? Why is this different? Ki halo v'yachol liton, kivin sh'ata lo yachol legavos bazem in achasam mishubadim mishum shelo chasumim olav eidim lo haya ichbas li shashtar yishar etzlacha. The answer is because the debtor can say, because since this promissory note cannot collect from encumbered property, I didn't think it was important for me to get the note back from you. Since it has limited power anyway, and you're not going to be able to use this note to harass people who have done business with me and have purchased items from me, I didn't feel it necessary to collect the note from you. And according to the Rush and the Rif, that's a legitimate claim as to why he didn't demand the note back. Aval, das harama, he sha'afilu shebishtar zeh yefshel legavos mimishabdi mikol makam uchashav kishtar le'inin shein alo v'neman lomar parat. The Rama disagrees. This is not the Ramah. This is the Rama. The Rama, I know sometimes it gets confusing. The Rama is a Rishon. He predates even the Tur. He wrote a sefer called the Yad Rama. So he is of the opinion that no, that even though this promissory note is limited in its powers of collection, right? If the malva, if the creditor still has it in his possession, the debtor cannot say, I paid it back, because even such a note, you would normally expect him to take back before he pays back the loan. So this is a machlokas in the Rishonim. So how does the Shulchan Aruch paskin? Because of Shulchan Aruch sham deneman halo v'lomar parati neged oso hashtar. The Shulchan Aruch paskins like the first opinion, that if a lova claims that he paid it back, you have to believe him. Vafilu im hitkayem b'fnei beis din, and that's true even if the shtar was registered with the beis din. Neman, he still believed. The Yishba Shvuas Heses v'yiftar, and he has to take some kind of rabbinic oath, and then he doesn't have to pay. Ve'enu yachol lomar shtarcha biyadi my boy, she'eno shtar gamur legabos minachasim mishubadim, and it's not a complete shtar. And that's the reason why the creditor can't say, well, then why do I still have the note? Nimsa demaran pasa kedas harif v'harash. Ulam, harama shamhevi lahalacha edat harama, she'eno neman lomar paraiti. But the Rama disagrees. And the Rama goes like the Rama. Again, a little bit confusing. What? Yeah, that's right. The Rama and the quote cites the Rama, who says that a debtor is not believed to say, I paid it back. Venira shahasma hiskim bazeim harama. It seems like the sma is like the Rama and the Rama. Aval hashach pasa kedas maran, but the shach haskins like the mechaber. Kevin shekach das hagaonim v'harif v'harambam v'harosh v'haramban v'hatashbeitz. Kevin she'eno torif minachasim mishubadim lo chashash lahanichal biyada. The seam, and again, the argument being is that the debtor sometimes is not concerned about such a note to demand it back because he knows it has limited power. The seam sham dehayom pashan haminag deneman halova lomar paraiti umishum shelo tova ksav yado ein l'chaybo. And the Shach concludes by saying that that is the accepted minhag today, even among Ashkenazim, that if it's just a promissory note with a signature alone and not with witnesses, a person is believed to say he paid it back. What do we say in secular law?
None of them within one signature, and none of them have to be witness, enforceable. You want to have it somehow secure, and they're all unsecured debts. There's promises to pay, but they're enforceable under the Bills of Exchange Act and the law of the merchant. So it goes way, way back, like the Middle Ages for the commercial contract forms and stuff like that. But if you want to secure it, so like you have a lien and all that sort of stuff, you can. So you can go to a bank or whatever, sign or lender, and sign a promissory note or give a check, and then that's unsecured. They can then say, well, we're going to have collateral security with it. So you could have a charge on your shares, a pledge agreement that would go with it, have a mortgage or a chattel mortgage on a boat or whatever, and that would accompany your little documentation stuff. So then you register the security documents in the registries, the various registers, PPSA or land titles. Then the order of priority of the loan goes with the date of registration. So then whoever registers first in the system will then collect first when there's a default. But if you just had a promissory note, stand in line, because then above you, once the guy defaults, then you go to the government first, taxes, and then secured creditors like bank lenders and mortgagees and all this sort of stuff. And people have pledge agreements on chattels. They get liquidated out, paid out first, and then you stand in line. And
okay, but what if the debtor says, I paid that one back already?
Yeah, so if you say against a promissory note, I paid, so then to litigate it, and then it's a question of balance of probability, what's more, whatever. So there's no arguments one way or the other, but the argument is also, so why don't you have a canceled promissory note with holes punched in, or banks turned it around, put canceled or paid or something like that, where you go to a teller at the bank and they'll stamp it. If you don't have it, still argue, but then you'd say, then the judge has to then decide what
right. So you leave it up to the judge.
Yeah, it's up to the judge. It's no
right. Okay. Very, very interesting. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. All right. So then he says, Ulam im efshar legavos b'ksav yado be'erkos shel hamedina. So now look what he says. He says, if a promissory note with a signature without witnesses is sufficient to collect according to Dina de Malchusa, there's in the land where you live, V'dine ha'erkos eno neman lomar paraiti neged shtar hakasav b'ksav yado, and a person is not believed when he makes a claim that I paid it back if it's clearly that he wrote and signed the note. V'vadai shegam b'din Torah lo yeh neman lomar paraiti. Then in that land, a lova, a debtor, will not be believed to say that he paid it back, because the force of the Dina de Malchusa should have compelled the debtor to make sure that he got the note back. Kamosha Kosov Hatumin, Tumim, the Anan Sahadi, the Kevin Shiyachal Hamal Velahotzi Shtarkazeh Berkos, Vischaibalo Velashalem. And Rabbi Yonasan Eibschitz actually makes this point. He says, we assume that since we know that the creditor can use this note to extract money from the debtor in court, in a secular court, then for that reason alone, the debtor would never have allowed that note to remain in the hands of the creditor. Because remember, what's the whole point? The lovas, the reason why the Rush and the Rif allow a lova to say, I paid it back, is because the argument goes that the lova could always say, well, I figured since this note can't collect from encumbered property, it's not such a strong note, I just let you hold on to it. It didn't bother me. But if, according to Canadian law or American law or Israeli law, this note has the power of collection in a secular court, then why would the lova can't make that argument anymore? You can't say, well, I didn't think it was such a powerful instrument. What do you mean it's not a powerful instrument? I can go to secular court and collect on it 100% of the time. And it's on that basis, says the Tumim, that we don't accept the claim that I paid you back. And he writes that he found this explicitly in a tshuva from the Ramban. So according to that, bizmanenu, in modern times, im bedine erkos govim b'shtar kazeh, if the courts do allow such a note to be used as an instrument of collection, then even the Machaber would agree that a lova is not believed when he says, I paid you back. The imbe erkaot logo v'mal shtar kazeh. But if in secular court they don't allow for collection on such a note, then all the debtor needs to do is make a claim that I paid it back, take a shavua, which I guess maybe in this circumstance the Beis Din will allow the guy to take a shavua. I'm not sure. I've never seen anyone take a shavua in Beis Din, but he says that such a thing could happen, and then he'll be believed. He says it. He says, but since nowadays we don't impose shavuas, he says nowadays we don't impose any shavuas. What has become the accepted minhag in Beis Din? If normally a guy is obligated to take a shavua in order to be pater, we obligate him to pay a third of the claim. Period. In other words, if he takes a shvua, he's pater. Today we don't allow shvuas, so instead we make him pay a third of the. I was not aware of this, and therefore, but it all has to be according to the estimation of the dayan, which is really interesting, because at the end of the day, what he's saying is that if you live in a society where this note could be collected upon in a secular court, then the lova is not believed to say paraiti, I paid you, because why would you allow the creditor to hold on to it?
That's to pay, even if he really paid and he doesn't have the note, will he still need to pay 30% more, like a penalty?
It's not a penalty. The Beis Din has no idea whether he paid it back or not. Where's your evidence that you paid it back? Right? So if the secular courts do not enforce this note, he doesn't have to pay anything. But if but he will have to pay a third if the guy goes to Beis Din and says, but I still have the note. But if the secular courts will enforce this note with the power of 100% power of collection, then the lova can't say well, I paid it back and just get it off with the 30. He has to pay the full amount. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So plaintiff puts it in, let's say, small claims court, puts it in court. The court basically looks at the debtor and says, okay, sir, what's your defense?
Yeah.
So the defense is, oh, I have 6 post-dated checks in the reference line that says promissory note to so-and-so, and the check's canceled, and we introduce that. That would be an excellent defense, approved.
Absolutely.
Right. So
that's like having a receipt that the debt was paid.
Is making it referable to the note, right? So, but other people come in all the time and say, "Oh, here's my bank statement that shows every month I paid $300, and that was for the promissory note." And then you get cross-examined and say, "Well, that was the thing you made your wife every month, or you made your rent." It's not referenceable to that at all. It's
okay, yeah. Else. So people pull shtick.
Bank records and things like this. So,
all right, we're gonna hold it